In a world where carbs are your enemy, you need one man to help you fight your battles. That man is Jimmy.
Combating nutrition disinformation and general bull. It's Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com.
Living La Vida low carb. This show is changing lives. We talking about your diet, trying to get you feeling right. Cut up them avocados, fry some eggs. Time to explore the longest running health podcast, hosted by Jimmy Moore. Time to give up the crappy garbage. We're getting into ketosis. Every day is a new step to your goal. Yeah, you're getting closer, motivated and focused. Don't stop, just go. Time to get inspiration from the Living La Vida low carb show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com. Woo!
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another Instagram Live, and we're here with another episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website, and here's how you can engage in the content on the show. You got to go follow me over on Instagram. So I'm at Livin' Low Carb Man, LivinLowCarbMan. Once you're there, you can engage live in the content. But if you missed the live, it's all good. You can watch it on replay for up to 24 hours over on Instagram. So be sure you follow me on Instagram. If you happen to miss the live or the replay, you need to go on over to YouTube. That's where we house all the past episodes of this here show. Just type in a keyword, Jimmy Rants. You will find the show. Finally, the best of the best moments of this here show are in podcast form. It's the Jimmy Rants podcast over on Apple Podcasts as well as Stitcher. All of these links, you guys, are at JimmyRants.com. Today's Jimmy Rants is shifting gears a bit, because for many years we have been told how our cholesterol in our blood matters. We've been told that high cholesterol is a problem. We've been told that all that fat that we eat in our diet is causing our cholesterol to go higher and higher, and thus by extension of that, this higher cholesterol would lead to heart disease, heart attacks, clogged arteries, so forth and so on. And with all the advent of knowledge and research that has come out on the issue of the relationship between cholesterol and heart disease, and there's a whole lot of nut in there, the people who vilify meat and animal-based foods and saturated fat have shifted gears a bit. And what I want to talk about here today is what they have shifted to. So this whole war on meat, which is a war on saturated fat, which is a war on keto, has now shifted from fat and cholesterol to now the iron content in the foods that you love to eat, which are primarily the meats. So I have been hearing a lot about this lately, that they're warning people of having high iron levels in the blood, and that would cause various kinds of issues. So I started noodling around online for an article where we could talk about this here today. And so my buddy Mark Sisson from Mark's Daily Apple, you know him from the Primal Blueprint, he has an article up on his website, Is Iron the New Cholesterol? And so I want to read this and give commentary along the way. But if you're just joining us, maybe you're one of those people who've been scared half to death by your doctor who says that you have high cholesterol and that you need to lower your fat in your diet, stop eating red meat, switch over to whole grains, yada, 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 to lower your cholesterol, switch away from saturated fat to more polyunsaturated fats like vegetable oils, and you'll lower your cholesterol. Well, they now realize that was a whole bunch of bullfunky, and it's not valid at all. So now, you guys, they have switched gears and they have shifted this war on meat and saturated fat, and by extension of all that, keto. They've now shifted it from fat and cholesterol over to iron. So we're going to read this article from Mark Sisson on Mark's Daily Apple, and we'll get the truth about what's going on here. So, Mark writes, one thing I've realized being in this game for so long is that if you're convinced that meat truly is deadly, you're not going to stop looking for reasons why. That's so true. Just because saturated fat and cholesterol has been pretty much vindicated in recent years doesn't mean that the vegans and the others who are anti-meat are going to stop looking for ways to vilify it. They tried blaming just about every part of meat over the years, including the protein itself, the saturated fat, the cholesterol, the methionine, the char on the barbecue, and even the obscure compounds like TMAO and NEU 5GC. The latest component of meat, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about this, you guys, that they've zeroed in on is the iron content. Iron is the essential mineral that's responsible for energy production and a whole host of other vital functions in the body. So iron in and of itself is not a bad thing in your health. The experts' track record with all these other evil meat components has many readers skeptical, so they've asked me to weigh in on the subject of iron. So Mark Sisson explains what iron is and what its purpose is. So iron is an essential mineral. It's integral in the production of energy as well as the creation of blood cells. If pregnant women don't have iron, they can't deliver oxygen and nutrients to their baby. If kids don't get it, they shortchange their mental and physical developments. As for those of us who are adults, if we don't get it, our basic day-to-day physiological function will fall apart. So as you can see, iron's pretty important. You want to have enough iron, and anyone who is iron deficient would be the first to tell you how it makes you feel anemic. And so adequate iron levels is critical. Without adequate iron, our antioxidant defenses, our immunity, and our metabolic function all suffer. Most countries even mandate that they fortify all the refined flours with large amounts of iron as a means of preventing these tragedies. So it sounds pretty good, right? Iron seems to be a good thing in the body. So what could be the harm in having iron come from meat and other sources in your diet? So Mark Sisson gets into that now. Iron has a dark side. A large body of observational evidence, which we're not a big fan of here on Jimmy Rants, but let's go with what he has to say. It links elevated iron levels to disease and disease states, including type 2 diabetes, heart disease, insulin resistance, inflammation, Alzheimer's, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, fatty liver disease, hypothyroidism, arthritis, as well as cancer. If you can name the disease, it's probably linked to an elevation in iron. As much as I'd like to, I simply cannot dismiss these connections as non-causal. Well, the key in this whole sentence about the dark side of iron is that every one of those studies is observational. And I've talked till I'm blue in the face that those kind of studies don't really tell you a whole lot other than they look for connections and correlations so that you can form a hypothesis to test. So if they want to test the effects of having higher iron levels on all of these disease states, go for it. I want to see it in a randomized control clinical way. Unfortunately, all we have is observational evidence and no more. So if you're just joining us, perhaps you have noticed that the war on cholesterol has seemingly died down, although your doctor is probably still scaring the bejeebies out of you that having high cholesterol is some kind of a disease state. But for most of the world, this whole vilification of higher cholesterol and eating saturated fat, and especially when it comes from animal-based foods and ketogenic diets, they're not really focusing a lot on that aspect of meat anymore. So what they have turned their attention to instead is the iron content that is in meat. And so I'm reading a story from my buddy Mark Sisson from Mark's Daily Apple, all about how iron is the new boogeyman when it comes to meat. So let me continue. Iron is inherently reactionary. The very same proclivity for electron exchange that makes iron so integral in biochemical reactions that address stress and support health means it also can create free radicals that would damage DNA, cells, blood lipids, as well as increase stress and harm your health. So that's one of the big things that he says is a problem with iron, is it helps to increase free radicals. And we know from basic science that we learned that free radicals is no bueno. You want to reduce free radicals in the body and to make yourself as healthy as you can be. So that's a concern with higher iron. Number two, there's this thing called hereditary hemochromatosis. This is a genetic condition that increases a person's absorption and retention of dietary iron. This has benefits in certain contexts. Carriers have a natural resistance to the bubonic plague, as one effect of hemochromatosis is to render white immune cells iron deficient and thus resistant to the plague, which feeds on the iron, but it's mostly negative in this today's age where we are plague free. Many hemochromatosis literature focuses on homozygotes, which is a carrier of 2 copies of the gene, as well as iron overload related diseases, things like cirrhosis, liver fibrosis, liver cancer, elevated liver enzymes, physician diagnosed systemic hemochromatosis, or finger arthritis. These are all bad conditions to be sure, but that's not even the complete list. Homozygous carriers of the mutation have great risks for diabetes, arthritis, fatigue, liver disease, frailty, and muscle loss. They're also more likely to experience neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and even heterozygous carriers who only have 1 copy of the variant have an elevated risk of iron overload compared to the general population. So I have forever had high iron levels. I have just dealt with this pretty much my entire life. I'm not sure if I have the genetic tendency for hemochromatosis, but I certainly have always had higher levels of iron. And here in a minute, when we talk about what you can do to lower iron, I'll tell a story about what happened when I did one of these things and it actually took it the other direction where my iron levels got super low. I'll give you that story here in a minute. You guys still with me? Thanks for being here. All right. So Mark Sisson says, but couldn't it be that the hemochromatosis gene is increasing disease risk through another route other than iron? So he says perhaps high iron is just a marker of disease and not actually the cause. Most genes have more than one effect. But he says here probably not. The most reliable treatment for hereditary hemochromatosis is this thing called a phlebotomy. Have you ever given blood? Well, every time you give blood, when you give blood, it actually drains out whatever is in your blood at the time. So if you have higher iron levels, bloodletting, phlebotomy, those are ways that you can lower the amount of iron that's in your blood. That is something that I have to do on a regular basis. And about 3-4 years ago, I was doing it on the regular because I was tired of seeing my iron levels so high because of some of the things that Mark Sisson wrote about here. And so I was going about every time they would let me, which was about every 8 to 10 weeks, I was giving blood. Well, it turns out you can give too much blood. While it did regenerate enough blood so that the next time I gave, I had plenty of blood to give, what it did was it lowered my iron levels too much, and I started getting anemic and I was having issues. And thankfully, because I run a whole lot of blood tests often, somebody was able to catch that for me, and I was able to get the iron back up again. So, besides a phlebotomy, what else can you do? It may be beneficial in people without clinical iron overload to reduce iron stores. You will also increase insulin sensitivity. So maybe you still deal with insulin resistance and you're eating keto and yet you still have signs of insulin resistance. It could be that you have higher iron levels. And so giving blood would help you increase this insulin sensitivity. In insulin resistant men who have fatty liver disease, simply giving blood on a regular basis help to normalize their insulin sensitivity as well as liver enzymes. Those people who eat meat, blood donation reduce ferritin levels that would match those people who eat lacto-ovo-vegetarian and improve their insulin sensitivity as well. One study even tested the effects of randomized phlebotomy on cancer, and after 4.5 years, those who had been placed in the phlebotomy group actually lived longer, had less cancer, and lower ferritin levels than the subjects who did not give blood. How simple is that? How simple is it to just go down to your local Red Cross, to go down to your local blood bank and give blood on a periodic basis? Now again, cautionary tale, you can give too much blood. I gave 6 times in 1 year, and that was too much. I've now tried to make it a goal to do about 3 times a year. I am definitely due to go get blood soon as a means of lowering iron. So Mark Sisson continues in his article, I can't argue with this research. The idea that a primary component of a food that we've been eating for millions of years, talking about meat, and to which we may even owe much of our brain power, it comes from the iron in meat. It still rankles. Is iron truly inherently bad, or is there anything about our modern environment that makes it more bad? All right, so Mark Sisson talks about some of the modern influences on your iron levels that you need to know about. Less bleeding is one. One factor is we don't shed as much blood as we used to. Most men engage in far fewer bouts of violent conflict. So think about hunter-gatherer ancestors used to have to go kill animals. Well, I'm sure in the fight to kill the animal fought back, and there was a little bit of bloodshed from the men and people that were killing the animals. That doesn't happen anymore. Most people also have fewer parasites that feast on their blood. And when's the last time you exchanged blood oaths with anyone? Yeah, we have fewer opportunities to bleed, in other words. That's why a regular phlebotomy can be such a useful tool for men and even some women who have too much iron in their body. It all emulates the bloodletting that we used to do very naturally. So that's one. Number 2, how about less intensive activity? We use iron to help us generate energy, and the more physical activity in which you engage, the more iron that you utilize. This is usually couched in warnings for female athletes who engage in intensive training, but it can also explain the beneficial effects of people who exercise who have iron overload. There are even cases of mild exercise that can cause you to have iron deficiency. So everything that increases energy expenditure, which includes walking, gardening, hiking, will at least subtly reduce iron stores. More activity, less iron sitting around, getting idle, that would get you into trouble. So if you're just joining us, we're talking about the brand new cholesterol, because everybody's kind of given up on cholesterol being this great enemy in your health, other than your medical doctor. They probably are still vilifying it. But we now know cholesterol really isn't a nutrient of concern, as the 2015 dietary guidelines told us. Saturated fat has been pretty much vindicated as well. So the new bugaboo in meat, on this war on meat, they have shifted away from fat and cholesterol being the enemy to now looking at the iron content in meat. And so we're going over this article that I found from my buddy Mark Sisson from Mark's Daily Apple. And we're talking about what influences iron levels in the modern day. So we're up to the next one, and it's one I've talked about quite a bit. Too many seed oils. So these are the vegetable oils that are out there. I strongly suspect that the unprecedented decimation of high omega-6 seed oils throughout the food supply our body fat and our cellular membranes are exacerbating, if not causing, the relationship between excess iron and various diseases. Take the supposedly ironclad relationship, all pun intended, between hemiiron and colon cancer, which is mediated by iron's peroxidative alteration of fatty acids in the colon. So they've done some animal studies on this that seek to show this relationship, that you can't get the colon cancer to take until you feed the animal high PUFA oils, that's the polyunsaturated fats, along with hemiiron. In one such study, feeding hemiiron to rats promoted colon cancer only when they were fed high PUFA safflower oil. Feeding them monounsaturated fat-rich and far more oxidatively stable olive oil alongside the iron prevented the colon from developing cancer. In another paper, only mice consuming fish oil and safflower oil diets exhibited carcinogenic fecal peroxides after they had iron. A coconut oil-based group of mice had no negative reaction to the iron. Among a cohort of U.S. nurses where polyunsaturated fat intake is around 7% of their calories, iron intake had moderate links to colon cancer. So in other words, all of this, you guys, puts the relationship that these vegetable oils, which, oh yeah, by the way, are promoted as healthy by groups like the American Diabetes Association, the American Heart Association, so forth and so on, they think it hangs the moon being able to have these seed oils, but they, along with iron intake, could be leading to various cancers. That's not good. So, what do you do about all of this? For men and postmenopausal women, you should figure out your hemochromatosis status. So do you know if you have hemochromatosis, which is a genetic predisposition for having high iron levels? You need to find that out. So both men and women who have this hereditary condition can have elevated risk of iron overload related diseases. They are much higher for men, by the way. Premenopausal women have a handy built-in mechanism for getting rid of the iron, and that's through menstruation. Modern men and older women with the absence of internal parasites and a lower tendency to engage in bloody hand-to-hand fighting, you have fewer opportunities to shed the iron. Your doctor can order this test to see if you have the genetic predisposition for hemochromatosis. You can also go through a genetic testing service, and what you're looking for on the genetic tests, there's two specific alphanumeric things you need to look for. So maybe you want to write this one down. The first one that would be a positive hit for genetic hemochromatosis is C282Y. And then the second one is H63D. So I'm pretty sure 23andMe and some of the other hereditary markers, genetic markers that you can have run would show those. So look for those two, again, C282Y and H63D. If you have either one of those, then you probably have a genetic tendency to have higher iron levels. What else can you do? Do it earlier rather than later. Studies indicate that one of the biggest predictors of whether someone with a genetic iron overload develops liver cancer is their age at the diagnosis of hemochromatosis. So you don't want to wait. If you wait, you will incur more damage. The sooner you know, the sooner you can do something about it, and perhaps you can ward off the inevitability of cancer. So even if you're negative for having hereditary hemochromatosis, you can still get iron overload. It doesn't just have to be a genetic condition. You can determine this by asking your doctor for what's called a ferritin test. Every doctor in the world should know what a ferritin test is. They learned about this in medical school. According to the Mayo Clinic for men, your ferritin reference range needs to be between 24 to 336. For women, it's between 11 and 307. Now that is a wide range. Your levels that your doctor would probably classify as normal have been associated with insulin resistance, atherosclerosis, and reduced telomere length, which is a marker of aging. So Mark Sisson says in his article, levels that are approaching 200 nanograms per milliliter in men should be classified as high, and lower may be even better. One study, egg and dairy eating vegetarian men had ferritin levels of 35, and they had better insulin sensitivity than meat eating men whose ferritin was 72. Once the meat-eating men donated enough blood to get down to 35, the meat eaters also saw insulin sensitivity improve. I think this is one of the reasons why Jimmy Moore still deals with insulin resistance. I have high iron levels, and I'm doing some of these things that Mark mentions in this article, but it means I have to be very hypervigilant about it and proactive about it. Blood donation is used to induce near iron deficiency, the lowest blood iron store that allows normal red blood cell production. This Dr. F.S. Faccini uses this in his gout patients to clear them of gout attacks for as long as they maintain it. His patients at very high risk for heart disease also sees major benefits from hitting very low ferritin levels, commonly seen in premenopausal women, including having an increase in your HDL cholesterol, lower blood pressure, and even if they started with a normal ferritin level, having it go down even more showed the benefit. So the conclusion that Mark Sisson says is what seems safe is to stay on the low end of normal. So anywhere from 50 to 150 nanograms per milliliter for your iron, as long as you don't have any symptoms of low iron. Trust me, if you have low iron, you're going to know it. You're going to feel it. You're going to be very sluggish, fatigued. Anybody that has iron deficiency, you know what I'm talking about. As for women, higher levels don't seem to correlate with the same health issues for you guys. So lucky you, says Mark Sisson. Now, if you have high iron levels or high ferritin levels, what should you do? So we've already talked about donating blood, and plus it's for a good cause. You'll be able to help someone get blood that they need if their life is in danger and they need blood. So especially if you have a rarer blood type, you might even get paid to have your blood drawn out. I know my mom has AB negative, so it's a really rare blood type, whereas I have A positive, which is one of those kind of universal type of common blood types. And so they love people like my mom and like me, pretty much anybody, because they're always looking for blood. So donate blood. It's the quickest and safest way that also does the most social good to donate blood. When you donate it, your body must upregulate hemoglobin production to replace this blood, and that would require the iron which it takes from the body stores. So when you give blood, it gets rid of the iron that was in there, but then it uses the iron that is remaining in the blood to help produce the new blood. So it's pretty cool how that all works. So listen to this one carefully, you guys, especially those of you that eat keto, paleo, even carnivore. Don't manage an iron overload with your diet. So a lot of people, they go off the deep end when they see that they have high iron levels and they automatically start cutting meat. You do not want to give up red meat consumption, and we've talked about before all the health benefits that come from eating red meat. So that's the wrong thing to do. You don't want to give up red meat. You don't want to stop eating liver, which is very high in iron, but you don't want to stop eating nutrient-dense foods that will nourish your body. You don't want to stop eating oysters if you eat them in your diet. I don't like oysters. They're disgusting to me, but they have a lot of iron in them, so some people would cut them out. And don't religiously adhere to reverse kosher, only eating meat in the presence of dairy to inhibit the iron absorption. So these are things that people tend to do with their diet, and Mark Sisson says don't manage this iron overload in these ways. So if you make dietary iron the focal point, you're going to miss all of those nutrients that come in those foods. And here's the thing, when you give your body the nutrients it needs, it can help you manage that iron, despite the fact that those foods that you eat may have iron in them. Things like red meat and liver are just incredibly nutrient dense for you. You'll also run yourself ragged following even more food restriction. One of the things we're trying to get away from, and I see my friend Stephanie Dodier is on here, one of the things that she talks about a lot in her work is how people keep restricting. And if now you have higher iron levels and you restrict some more, you're just giving yourself more stress and a more chance of having nutrient deficiencies. Don't do that. Don't do that. Also, don't manage an iron overload that you don't have. You got to test to see where you stand in your iron. Don't assume because you eat red meat, because you have liver and other sources of iron in your diet, don't just assume that you have higher iron in your blood. Not necessarily. So you can obsess about the iron without actually having it tested. So confirm it through a test. People start giving blood on their own when they haven't even tested to see if they have higher iron yet. Trying to reduce iron absorption by pairing dairy and calcium with their iron-rich foods, avoiding iron-rich foods, it's all totally blind. So you gotta go to your doctor and say, Doc, I wanna test my iron levels. Let's see where I am. So ferritin is that test that you're asking for. It's called ferritin, Ferritin. And ask for it by name. Earlier in this Jimmy Rants, I gave you the range that you should be looking for. And if you're outside of that range, especially on the high end, that's when you need to give blood. That's when you need to do some of the things that we talked about here. So get tested. And then avoid seed oils. Stop taking in vegetable oils. You don't need them anyway. And most of you that follow my work, you know that I list seed oils, vegetable oils as one of the two twin villains in your diet. So seed oils, vegetable oils like corn oil, soybean oil, canola oil, all of those kinds. And then the other thing is carbohydrates. So don't eat seed oils because almost certainly they will make the problem worse with the iron overload. They may be responsible for all the negative effects and links to diseases. So it's these bad oils along with higher iron that lead your body to become diseased. Did you even know that? Did you even think about that? Also, include phytonutrient-rich foods, things like fruits, vegetables, herbs, teas, and coffee. There are polyphenols in those, and they inhibit iron absorption. They also reduce the oxidative interaction between iron and fat. So you don't want that oxidation to start taking place. And by consuming things like vegetables, herbs, teas, coffee, and phytonutrient-rich fruits, you'll be able to prevent that. So the bottom line, get tested, be aware about iron, don't let it rule you, don't let it overlord you. It's an overload, not an overlord, is what Mark Sisson said. And get tested, and then follow the advice that we talked about here today. So hopefully on this Jimmy Rants today, you learned a little bit, and they're going to try their darndest, you guys, to vilify this extremely healthy food that you're consuming on your keto, your paleo, your carnivore type of diet. Meat is incredibly nutrient dense, and we do not need to vilify it. They're going to work on every possible angle to get you to stop eating meat. And while it has not worked with cholesterol and fat to vilify meat in that way, they're now shifting over to iron. And I want you to be aware of this. So when you start seeing stories about this, I try to keep you guys on the cutting edge. You're gonna see stories warning people about high iron levels. And the thing that they're gonna tell people to do is cut your red meat and cut down on all that dastardly food in your diet that's giving you higher iron and all these horrible things that are supposed to happen to your health from having the higher iron. And hopefully after today's Jimmy Rants and this very quality information from my bud, Mark Sisson, you learned a little something here today. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. Welcome in, welcome in. Thank you for being here on this Jimmy Rants. Val says, when I was in chemotherapy, there was a woman who had to get blood drained because she had too high of an iron. That was the first I had ever heard of that. Yeah, a lot of people, they don't realize a very simple way to cut down, not just on iron, but a lot of things that are kind of junky in your blood. One of the best ways to clean it up is to get blood. Now, again, earlier I talked about how I gave 6 times in 1 year, and that was too much. I now aim for about 3 times a year to get blood. And when you get blood, you help somebody out in their time of need. You get rid and lower the amount of iron in your blood, because when you remove that blood, it takes iron to start creating the new blood. And so it pulls the iron that's remaining and helps you create new blood. And by doing that, it lowers your iron overload. So that's pretty cool, right? So you want to do that. Let's see. Yo says metabolic might. What's up, man? Val says mine is usually on the lower end. My mother-in-law has always been anemic. So thank you for bringing that up, Val. So if you're not one of those people who has higher iron levels, but you're lower than the norm, what can you do? So I know they do sell iron supplements that you can take. So obviously get it from real whole food first. So eat plenty of meat in your diet. Get some organ meats like liver, very iron rich. Eat oysters. Cook in a cast iron skillet. So this is all for people who have lower iron levels. You want to find that Goldilocks level of iron. Not too high, not too low. You want to have it in that just right period. And so if you tend to have a lower level of iron, do all you can to get iron in your diet. Do all you can to take supplements that would supplement your body with iron. Cook in a cast iron skillet. All of those things will help raise your iron. Nana PDV says, so I should possibly take up hand-to-hand combat. Mine is good, or it was at least less than a year ago. Yeah, it's funny. Sisson mentioned that we're not lowering our iron content because we used to do battle. And in doing battle, you lost blood. When you fought an animal, I think back, I was just in Italy and we were in the Colosseum, and all the gladiators that used to smash each other's heads in, I'm sure they lost some blood. Little did they know they were lowering their iron levels very naturally. Coastal Mom says, this is all good information to know. My ferritin has always been on the low end. Total iron is normal. So if it's on the low end, do those things I just talked about with the cast iron skillet and the iron supplements, and making sure you're getting plenty of red meat and liver and that kind of thing. Watch your supplements too, I would imagine. Yeah, Val, that's true. There are supplements, and this is why when you go keto, you hear me talk about that if you're going to take a supplement like a multivitamin, make sure you get an iron-free multivitamin. And people always go, iron-free, why iron-free? Because you get plenty of iron in the foods that you eat on a ketogenic diet. Red meat, obviously, liver, those things have a lot of iron, but even things like spinach have a lot of iron in them. So you don't want to overload your body by supplementing on top of this food. So that's a good tip. Thank you for reminding me about supplements. Val says, I was told that she wasn't allowed to give blood though. So in that case, they do make medical exceptions to giving blood. I don't know the reason why she wasn't allowed to give blood, but if you go to them and say, hey, I have higher iron levels, bloodletting is a known way to lower that. And what they do is they bloodlet and then they throw away the blood. So ask the doctor about that one. Liz says, if iron levels were high, would not cooking in an iron skillet meter that? If iron levels were high. So yes, it would actually make it worse. When I was saying about cooking in an iron skillet, I was referring to the people who have low iron, not high. Obviously, if you have high iron levels, you do not need to be cooking with a cast iron skillet. You do not need to be purposely going out of your way to take supplements or anything like that would have iron in them. Sorry you missed that, Liz. So the bottom line in this Jimmy Rants is you're going to hear a lot more talk about the iron level in the red meat that you might consume on your paleo, keto, carnivore type of diet. They have already realized they've lost the battle when it comes to having this war on meat. They've lost the battle when it comes to vilifying it because of its effects on your cholesterol, vilifying it because of the saturated fat. Those things are not an issue of concern in the mainstream anymore. So now they're shifting their attention over to the iron content. So hopefully this information that I shared here today on Jimmy Rants educated you a little bit about what you can do about it if you have higher iron levels. That's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. As always, if you want to engage live in this content, you got to go follow me over on Instagram. I'm at Living Low Carb Man, LivinLowCarbMan. Once you're there, you can engage live, just like all of these awesome people did here today. Thank you guys for being here. If you missed the live, you can watch it on replay for up to 24 hours. After 24 hours, it does disappear from Instagram. So go follow me over on YouTube. Type in a keyword search Jimmy Rants. You will find the show. Finally, the best of the best moments of this here show are in podcast form. It's the Jimmy Rants podcast over on Apple Podcasts as well as Stitcher. All of these links, you guys, are at JimmyRants.com. So tomorrow, I have a very special surprise. So I am about to get on the low carb cruise here in a couple of days. So I'm here in Newark, New Jersey, and I'm in a hotel where we'll be staying tomorrow. A lot of the people going on the low carb cruise will be coming into town, and one of those people was here on this Jimmy Rants here tonight. I don't know if she's still here, but keto coach Lauren is going to be joining me on Jimmy Rants tomorrow. So she's been on a couple of times before in the 340 something episodes that I've done. And I wrote to Lauren, I think it was earlier today, and I said, Lauren, you know you've got to come on Jimmy Rants when you get into town. So she's supposed to be in town tomorrow morning. So somewhere mid-morning Eastern time, we will be doing a Jimmy Rant. I don't know what we're talking about yet, but we'll be doing a Jimmy Rants with Lauren. I pretty much have the whole day tomorrow, so I may try to pack in a bunch of Jimmy Rants tomorrow. So I hope you guys are good with that, because I'm going to be having withdrawals if I can't do Jimmy Rants when I'm on the cruise ship. So word of warning, just thought I'd let you guys know. So until next time, we'll see you then.